I mean, imagine just for a second generating $16.6 billion in just 90 days.
Yeah, it's hard to even picture.
Right. You are moving enough cash to essentially fund a small country. The physical logistics of that much revenue are just staggering. But then, imagine stepping up to microphone on an earnings call to tell Wall Street that despite that absolute mountain of cash, somehow you actually lost 13 cents on every single share.
Which is wild.
It is. That is the bizarre, deeply counterintuitive reality of Merck's second quarter results for 2026. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are tearing through the transcript of Merck's Q2 earnings call. And our mission here is simple. We are skipping the corporate fluff, we are translating the heavy Wall Street jargon, and we are extracting the critical data points so that you, the retail investor, know exactly what to do with this stock.
Yeah. And, if you were to mentally graph Merck's quarter right now, the short-term line looks like a chaotic, flashing red heartbeat monitor, like the kind that makes day traders just panic.
Oh, excellent.
But if you zoom out, right, and look at their long-term pipeline, it looks like this steady upward climbing staircase. And that exact transition going from short-term financial chaos to long-term structural stability, well, that is the story Merck is aggressively trying to force the market to understand today.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right at the top line, because the sheer scale of the revenue is where this whole story gets its attention. So total revenue for the quarter hit $16.6 billion.
Right.
That is up 5% year over year. And I mean, in a vacuum, a 5% top line growth rate for a company carrying a market cap the size of Merck's is an absolute win.
It's massive.
Yeah, so you see that and you logically expect the bottom line to be just as green. But then you hit the non-GAAP earnings per share, the EPS, and there it is, a loss of 13 cents per share. And you're looking at the transcript going, wait, what? How does a pharma giant rake in $16.6 billion and still post a loss? It's kind of like throwing the biggest blockbuster movie premiere of the entire year, but spending your entire box office buying the rights to the sequel on the exact same night.
That is a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating here is the sequel they bought. So that massive hole in the bottom line, it was a $5.7 billion one-time charge.
Just wiped off the books?
Wiped out in a single afternoon, which, by the way, works out to $2.31 per share. And that is exactly why a $16 billion revenue quarter turned into a net loss on paper. Merck bought a company called Terns Pharmaceuticals.
Okay, I have to stop you right there, because the accounting mechanics of this confuse a lot of retail investors, myself included sometimes. I mean, if a tech company, if they buy a massive server farm for $5 billion, they get to count that as an asset, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They depreciate it over time. The bottom line doesn't just spontaneously implode in one single quarter. So why is pharma treated so differently here?
It comes down to a very specific kind of brutal accounting rule regarding what Wall Street calls acquired in-process R&D, or IP R&D.
Okay.
So when you buy a server farm, like in your example, that's a tangible asset. It has a guaranteed alternative future use. If your software startup fails, you can just turn around and sell the servers to someone else.
Right. They still have value.
Exactly. But when a pharmaceutical giant buys a smaller biotech company, they aren't usually buying factories or physical inventory. They are buying the intellectual property of a drug that is still sitting in clinical trials.
And because it's still in trials, there's a very real chance it might completely fail.
Yeah.
It has no alternative use. You can't just repurpose a failed leukemia compound into a headache pill.
Precisely. You can't just pivot. So the regulatory bodies like the SEC and FASB basically say, hey, because this asset is highly speculative and might never generate a single dollar of actual revenue, you cannot put it on your balance sheet as a safe long-term asset.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you have to take the pain immediately. You must expense the entire purchase price up front in the exact quarter you make the acquisition.
Yeah.
So Merck didn't actually burn $5.7 billion in operating cash in the traditional sense of, keeping the lights on or paying salaries.
Right. They absorbed a massive legally mandated accounting hit to acquire future IP.
Exactly.
Which really brings up the risk profile of this whole move. It's less like buying a guaranteed sequel to a movie and much more like using the profits from a championship sports season to buy the exclusive draft rights to some college phenom.
Yeah, that's spot on.
They look great in practice, their stats are incredible, but you don't actually know if they'll survive the big leagues until they get through phase 3 trials. So who is this phenom they drafted? Because Terns Pharmaceuticals wasn't generating meaningful revenue, right? Merck bought them for a specific pipeline drug called MK-4208.
Right, MK-4208. And this is a novel, potentially best-in-class therapy targeted at certain patients with chronic myeloid leukemia, or CML.
Okay.
So CML is this type of cancer that starts in the blood-forming cells of the bone marrow and then invades the blood. And while there are treatments available today, resistance to current therapies is a massive growing problem in oncology. The cancer mutates, the drugs stop working.
Wow, yeah.
So Merck is betting nearly $6 billion that MK-4208 has the exact specific molecular mechanism to overcome that resistance.
So they are willingly sacrificing the short-term optics of this quarter's EPS to aggressively strengthen their hematology pipeline.
Yes, exactly.
They are buying a late-stage growth opportunity because they know they are going to need it for the end of the decade.
They absolutely know they need it. And if you really want to understand the underlying health of the company making this huge bet, you have to back out that massive acquisition charge. You have to look at the core business. And management noted on the call that their gross margin dipped slightly this quarter, down to 81.1%, primarily due to some higher inventory reserves.
Wait, I want to pause on that number for a second. 81.1% gross margin.
It's crazy.
In almost any other sector, retail, manufacturing, even a lot of consumer tech hardware, an 80+% margin is completely unheard of.
Right.
That is essentially pure software level profitability, but on physical manufactured goods.
Right.
It tells the retail investor that underneath all the accounting noise of the Terns acquisition, the actual daily operations of Merck are just generating an ocean of cash.
It is an absolute cash-generating machine, which is exactly what allows them to confidently stroke a $5.7 billion check without breaking a sweat.
Right. So they have this massive cash engine, and they're spending billions to buy up future hits like Terns. That creates a lot of financial tension today. Because the EPS loss was a strategic choice to buy future growth, the next logical question we have to ask is, how is the current portfolio actually performing to fund these massive purchases? Let's talk about what is actually driving that $16.6 billion in revenue right now. And that story, inevitably, it has to begin with their undisputed king, Keytruda.
Keytruda is the financial heartbeat of Merck. Plain and simple, it is their flagship cancer immunology drug, and it brought in $8.4 billion this quarter alone.
$8.4 billion in a single quarter.
Yeah.
Just annualize that in your head for a second. We are talking over $33 billion a year from one single product. That is larger than the GDP of dozens of countries.
It's staggering.
Yeah.
It really is. And management noted that global growth for Keytruda was driven by strong uptake in earlier stage cancers, as well as continued really robust demand for metastatic indications. They are particularly seeing strong utilization in tumors that primarily affect women, like breast and cervical cancers. The drug is just ubiquitous in oncology wards globally.
But here is the friction point for the retail investor, right? Keytruda grew at 4% this quarter.
Yeah.
4% is steady, it's safe. But Wall Street does not pay a premium for 4% growth on a mature product. They want to know what happens next. The sheer size of Keytruda is actually a terrifying concentration risk.
It is.
So you have to look beyond the king. The growth of their newer drugs is where the real story of this quarter is actually hiding. And here's where it gets really interesting. I want to highlight Winrevair. This drug jumped 75% globally to $588 million for the quarter. They added over 1,800 new U.S. patients.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Winrevair is arguably the most vital proof point for Merck's future right now, because it proves they aren't just a one-trick oncology pony.
Right, they can do other things. Exactly. Let's look at the mechanism here. Winrevair treats pulmonary arterial hypertension, or PAH.
And this is a devastating disease.
Yeah.
Basically, the tiny arteries in your lungs thicken and narrow, right?
Yes.
Which means the right side of your heart has to pump exponentially harder just to push blood through the lungs to get oxygen. And eventually, the heart just gives out from the exhaustion of pumping against that massive resistance.
That's a perfect summary of it. It's a severe, life-threatening condition. And for a really long time, treatments only managed the symptoms. They tried to open the vessels a little bit. But Winrevair actually targets the underlying cellular signaling pathway that causes those vessels to thicken in the first place.
Wow. And from a financial perspective, a 75% revenue jump in a single quarter is a phenomenal trajectory. But 1,800 patients, I mean, to a retail investor who's used to consumer products, 1,800 customers sounds like a slow Tuesday at a local coffee shop, you know?
Right, it sounds tiny.
How does that translate to nearly $600 million in revenue? Well, this is the unique and, frankly, often controversial economics of rare disease, or what we call orphan drugs. Because the patient population is so incredibly small, the development costs, which are still billions of dollars, have to be recouped across a tiny user base.
Oh, I see.
Therefore, these transformative drugs carry a massive price tag. We're often talking hundreds of thousands of dollars per patient per year. Merck is heavily targeting this rollout with highly specialized sales forces. They are working directly with specialty pharmacies and cardiologists, so when they secure access for just one new PAH patient, the recurring revenue impact is immense.
It's massive. Okay, so it proves Merck can successfully launch a mega hit outside of cancer. But Winrevair wasn't the only breakthrough outside of oncology. There was a massive catalyst buried in the details of this call. The FDA just approved a drug called Lipvendra.
Yeah, and this is a monumental approval, not just for public health, but for Merck's total addressable market. Lipvendra is the first and only oral PCSK9 inhibitor designed to help reduce LDL, the bad cholesterol, in adults.
All right, let's get into the mechanics of this. Because anyone who has paid attention to the cholesterol space knows that PCSK9 inhibitors are not exactly new. They've been around for a few years, but they have exclusively been injections.
Correct. And the mechanism of a PCSK9 inhibitor is actually brilliant. Standard statins, which, millions of people take daily, they work by blocking your liver from producing cholesterol.
Okay.
But PCSK9 is a protein your body naturally makes that actually destroys the receptors on your liver that are responsible for clearing cholesterol out of your blood.
Wait, really? So your body is kind of fighting against itself?
Exactly. So if you inhibit that specific protein, your liver keeps these receptors active, and it can just clear massive amounts of bad cholesterol from your system.
But until Lipvendra, inhibiting that protein required you to literally give yourself a shot.
Exactly. And that delivery method naturally throttles the market. Patients despise needles.
Oh, yeah.
And primary care doctors, they hate the logistical hurdles of teaching patients how to self-inject, managing the cold storage, dealing with the specialized prior authorizations from insurance. It's a nightmare. So it often meant these highly effective drugs just stayed trapped in the realm of specialized cardiologists.
But Lipvendra is a daily oral pill, and they mentioned in their clinical trials when it was added to a standard statin, it reduced LDL cholesterol by up to 60%.
Yes.
60%. So instead of a needle, you just swallow a pill with your morning coffee.
It completely democratizes the treatment. And that is the critical takeaway for investors here. Moving from an injection to a daily pill moves the drug out of the specialist's office and directly into primary care. Every single general practitioner in the world writes prescriptions for daily cholesterol pills.
Okay, I get that. But I have to push back on the economics here for a second. A generic statin, like atorvastatin, is literally pennies a pill. It is practically free at the pharmacy counter. How is Merck going to convince insurance companies or Medicare to pay what will certainly be a massive premium for Lipvendra when the generic alternative costs basically nothing?
It's a vital question. But Merck's strategy isn't to replace statins for the average patient. Their target market is the roughly 30 million people in the U.S. alone who are already taking maximum doses of statins and still are not at their recommended LDL levels.
Oh, wow, 30 million.
Yeah, these are high-risk patients who need extreme cholesterol reduction to prevent a secondary heart attack or a stroke. And right now, the only option for those 30 million people is an injection.
And the CEO, Rob Davis, did try to manage expectations on the call. He said the rollout pace isn't going to be lightning fast right out of the gate. They have to fight through the exact insurance access battles you just mentioned, and they have to fight against doctor inertia.
Which is responsible management. Changing prescribing habits always takes time. But the regulatory wins are actually at their back here. The FDA pushed Lipvendra through using the commissioner's national priority voucher process.
Wait, so the government actively expedited this?
They did. The FDA explicitly wanted to target massive, lingering public health crises like cardiovascular disease with innovative breakthroughs that increase patient accessibility. They recognized that a pill is vastly more accessible than a shot, so they essentially rolled out the red carpet to get it to market faster.
That's huge. So we have a massive cash engine in Keytruda stabilizing the base. We have a rare disease hit with Winrevair generating massive margins per patient. And we have Lipvendra opening up an enormous primary care market. That creates a lot of operational momentum.
It sure does.
So with Keytruda stabilizing and these new drugs ramping up, we have to look at how management is translating this momentum into full-year expectations. How is the C-suite actually translating this into their guidance for the rest of the year?
This raises an important question, because this is where we see exactly how confident management actually is beneath all the PR speak.
Right. And looking at the data, management actually raised and narrowed their full-year 2026 revenue expectations. They are now projecting between $66.3 billion and $67.3 billion in revenue.
And, whenever a company narrows its guidance range halfway through the year, it is a massive signal of high internal visibility. They aren't guessing anymore. They know exactly how these product launches are tracking, and they have very few doubts about how the second half of the year will actually play out.
But, it's not all sunshine. They also pointed out that operating expenses are going to balloon to over $42 billion. Obviously, that is heavily skewed by that $5.8 billion upfront charge for the Terns acquisition we talked about. But still, $42 billion in expenses is a bitter pill for investors to swallow. And this is where I want to challenge the narrative Merck is selling. In the call, the CEO touted what he called a $70 billion commercial opportunity, stemming from over 20 new products coming down their pipeline. $70 billion. Sure, they have positive clinical data for a few things, but a $70 billion projection requires almost all 20 of those pipeline drugs to be absolute mega blockbusters. Isn't Wall Street right to discount that kind of rosy, best-case scenario internal math? Are they just throwing out massive, shiny numbers to distract investors from the fact that they are racking up huge expenses? Because they are terrified of what happens when Keytruda loses its patent.
That is the most important pushback you could offer. And frankly, it is the exact skepticism every major institutional analyst brought to that earnings call. Is the $70 billion figure just corporate spin? Let's look at the hard data management used to defend it.
Okay, let's hear it.
First, despite that $42 billion expense mountain, they guided to a full-year EPS of $2.66 to $2.76.
So they are still highly profitable for the full year, even after eating the Terns acquisition.
Yes. They are proving their core business is robust enough to completely absorb a nearly $6 billion hit and still remain firmly in the black. That is incredible financial muscle. But more importantly, regarding that $70 billion pipeline, they aren't just selling a dream. They are actively de-risking those assets faster than Wall Street models actually predicted.
And just to clarify, de-risking meaning they're hitting the hard clinical milestones to prove the science actually works.
Exactly. The head of R&D, Dr. Dean Lai, spent a significant portion of the call laying out a laundry list of late-stage pipeline successes. For example, they just achieved positive phase 3 results for SAC-TMT.
Oh, let me jump in on SAC-TMT because the underlying technology here is just fascinating. This is an antibody drug conjugate, or an ADC, targeted at endometrial cancer. And for the retail investor who doesn't have a medical degree, an antibody drug conjugate is basically a microscopic guided smart bomb.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, historically, chemotherapy is basically carpet bombing the body. It kills the cancer, but it destroys healthy tissue too. You lose your hair, you get violently ill. But with an ADC, the antibody acts as a homing beacon that only tracks down specific cancer cells. In this case, cells expressing the 2-ROP2 protein.
Right.
And once it attaches to the cancer cell, the conjugate delivers the toxic payload directly inside the tumor, mostly sparing the healthy cells around it.
It's a brilliant way to describe it. It maximizes the destruction of the tumor while vastly limiting the systemic toxicity for the patient. And because the phase 3 data was so incredibly positive, Merck noted they plan to use another priority review voucher to accelerate its filing with the FDA.
Wow, another one. But it's not just oncology, right? Dr. Layat also highlighted a drug called islatravir.
Yes, islatravir. It is currently being tested in combination with another drug, and it has the potential to become the first oral once-weekly HIV treatment.
A once-weekly pill for HIV. I mean, imagine the quality of life upgrade for a patient. Going from managing a strict daily pill regimen that reminds you of your illness every single morning to simply taking a pill once a week. The compliance rates alone would skyrocket.
Compliance is exactly why the market potential is so high there. And they also mentioned positive phase 3 induction results for tulisokibart, which is an immunology drug aimed at severe ulcerative colitis.
Okay, I see your point. The C-suite isn't just waving their hands and demanding Wall Street believe in a $70 billion phantom pipeline. They are aggressively pointing to phase 3 clinical trial data that has already met its endpoints to support that projection. The guidance reflects a deep internal confidence that they have the actual medical breakthroughs necessary to secure the company's future.
They're spending heavily right now, yes, but they are spending on assets that are already proving their worth in the clinic.
So we have the headline numbers and the accounting quirks. We have the story behind those numbers, with Winrevair and Lipvendra proving they can win outside of cancer. And we have management's financial promises backed by phase 3 clinical data. Now, we need to synthesize all of this into a concrete action plan for the retail investor listening right now. So what does this all mean? What is the definitive verdict on Merck stock?
Well, for anyone currently holding Merck, or anyone sitting on cash thinking of initiating a position, my verdict is distinctly bullish.
Okay.
But I have to qualify that heavily. This is a bullish thesis for the long-term patient investor. This is not a momentum stock for someone looking for a quick overnight pop in share price.
Right. Why the demand for patience, though? What is the lingering fear keeping the stock price grounded?
It's the boogeyman in the room. The entire pharmaceutical sector and Wall Street in general has been terrified for years about the day Keytruda loses its patent protection. In the industry, this is known as the LOE, or loss of exclusivity.
And for a retail investor who hasn't lived through one of these cycles, an LOE is a terrifying event. When a drug that makes over $30 billion a year finally loses its patent, generic manufacturers or biosimilar companies flood the market with cheap knockoffs. The price of the drug plummets by 80 or 90% almost overnight, and the original company's market share just evaporates. We saw it happen to Pfizer with Lipitor. We saw it happen to AbbVie with Humira. It is a financial cliff.
It is the single biggest existential threat a pharma company can face. And Rob Davis was asked point blank about this exact Keytruda transition period on the call.
And how did he frame it? Because CEOs always try to spin the LOE.
He called the upcoming LOE transition more of a hill than a cliff. He is actively predicting a shallow dip in earnings, followed by a fast, aggressive return to growth. He even noted that on a non-risk adjusted basis, their internal models suggest they aspire to actually grow through the transition period.
Grow through a $30 billion patent cliff? I mean, that sounds almost dangerously optimistic. Based on everything we've unpacked today, do you actually believe him, or is that just a CEO trying to keep his institutional investors from panic selling?
I believe him. And the data from this specific Q2 earnings report is the proof. You have to look at their actions, not just their optimistic words. By willingly sacrificing short-term EPS to buy Terns Pharmaceuticals, they are preemptively buying a massive future revenue stream in hematology. By successfully delivering 75% growth on Winrevair, they are proving they can dominate rare cardiovascular diseases today.
And by launching Lipvendra, they are opening up a massive, completely untapped primary care market for cholesterol.
Exactly. Merck is actively, aggressively building a multi-layered safety net for the post-Keytruda era. They are diversifying their revenue streams into rare cardiovascular diseases, massive primary care markets, immunology, and infectious diseases. They are showing Wall Street, with hard data, that there is a vibrant, highly profitable life after Keytruda.
So the retail investor holding the stock right now should look right past that 13-cent EPS loss this quarter.
Look completely past it. Understand that the loss was a strategic, necessary investment in the company's survival and dominance for the 2030s. The underlying business is generating an immense amount of cash, the gross margins are absolutely elite for the sector, and the pipeline is producing tangible phase 3 results faster than anticipated. If you are a long-term investor, the foundation Merck is building right now is remarkably strong.
That is a phenomenal breakdown. Thank you for walking us through the mechanics behind the numbers. And thank you to everyone listening for joining this deep dive. To summarize our core takeaway today, Merck took a short-term hit on paper to secure a long-term economic moat. They spent the profits from their championship season, but they drafted a rookie class that looks like guaranteed Hall of Famers.
A very expensive rookie class, but likely a deeply profitable one for the next decade.
Before we go, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final unaddressed thread from this earnings call to ponder. We talked a lot today about Lipvendra, the new daily cholesterol pill that reduces bad cholesterol by up to 60%.
A massive achievement on its own, given the oral delivery.
It is. But buried deep in the R&D update, the head of research mentions something else. They are currently developing a combination pill. They want to mix their new drug, Lipvendra, with a standard, cheap statin like rosuvastatin and put them together in a single daily pill, their ultimate clinical goal, to achieve a mind-boggling 80% reduction in bad cholesterol.
An 80% reduction from a single daily oral pill. That is efficacy that used to be science fiction.
Exactly. So here's the thought to mull over as you watch this doc. If a simple daily pill can eventually achieve an 80% reduction in LDL cholesterol, a pill that can be easily prescribed by any primary care doctor in the world, without a single needle involved, will the entire multi-billion-dollar market for injectable cholesterol drugs simply cease to exist in a few years? It's something to think about as you watch this sector evolve. We'll see you on the next deep dive.